seated.
Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
For those of you that watch just on YouTube, I was told last week was probably the best sermon ever preached. And the problem was I forgot to hit the record button. So the best sermon ever preached is lost forever. So I'm sorry, I apologize for that. I forgot to hit that button, so we're hopefully back going again this week. We've got this sermon and one more sermon on the idea that we've been looking at. It's never too late, no matter what. And then let me tell you where we're going to be going. We're going to be talking about the idea of moving forward, about forgetting the past and the importance of us as God's people going this way. All right, how many of you have had life turn out just like you thought it would? Yeah. Sometimes plan A just doesn't work, right? Whether it's a little plan or a big plan, it has a way of disappointing us. It's disappointing to have our plans fail, but if we feel that we've messed up God's plan A for our lives, we can really feel hopeless. But many people fall apart when their plans fall apart. We all know people who are still stuck in a distant disappointment, and maybe that's us. But have we ever discovered that plan B might actually be better than plan A? In the midst of our plan A unraveling, I realize it's hard to see. But what I want to challenge us with, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes plan B might be better. Our plan A for our lives back in the day was I was taking over my dad's oil field business. I was going to make a whole lot of money, and I was going to be retired by the age of 50. Well, evidently God had other plans. Plan B was that I become a preacher and I had to work to the day I die. But, that was God's plan B. But, hold on to our plans loosely, because that there may be better plans ahead. We know God has a plan for our lives. That's what Larry read for us there in Jeremiah 29:11. I mean, God makes His plans for His people, and they are good plans that ultimately bring blessings to our lives. But we have to be responsible to seek those things and ask Him to fulfill those promises. Now, I want us to understand that God has that great plan for our lives. We don't have to fear any planned disappointments, because we know that God has us where? In the palm of His hand. So instead of living in fear and worry because maybe our plan A in life fell apart, let's look at it through the eyes of faith. And my point's this: if plan A isn't working, and I assume probably most of us are actually probably on plan X, Y, or Z by now, but understand that God has something better. When our plans fall apart, God may be doing one of the following things that we want to look at today. 3 things. First one is this: when life doesn't turn out the way we thought it would, He may be protecting us from something, number one. Anytime we talk about plans, we need to ask this question, I think. Number one, is it only our plan, or is it God's plan for our lives? You know, sometimes I think we get so impressed by the plans we've made for our lives that we don't stop for a minute and pray and consider, God, is this what you want for my life? Now, I'm not saying we should never make plans, you know that. I'm saying this, that we've got to submit all of our plans to the Lord. You know, people think that God leads us by opening doors of opportunity, which, true, He does. But have we ever thought about this? That God can lead us just as easily by closing a door. You know, God closed the oil field door to me, and I got to tell you, during those few periods of life, it was devastating. I mean, we thought our world had ended. But He was opening a door to preaching. And I got to tell you, I fought and kicked the whole way. But here I am. So just because something doesn't work out doesn't mean we failed. It may mean that God's protecting us and guiding us away from something that we thought was our plan, when in fact we need to be following His plan. That leads us to number 2. When our plans seem to fall apart, God very well could be producing something in us. Now I want you to turn to Matthew 16. Matthew 16. You know, when we read the Gospels, I mean, you just can't help but laugh at times of Peter's mishaps. I mean, it seems like he's constantly getting into some type of trouble. And his plans rarely worked out the way he thought they should. And I just want to give you a few examples here. Matthew 16, let me read 21 through 23. From that time, Jesus began to show His disciples He's going to go to Jerusalem, suffer many things, the elders and chief priests, scribes, and be killed, and raised on the third day. Peter took Him aside and began to rebuke Him, saying, God forbid it, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But He turned to Peter and said, Get behind me, Satan, you're a stumbling block to me, if you're not setting your mind on God's interest. We could very well say God's will, but man's. I mean, when Jesus tells the disciples, I'm going to Jerusalem, Peter pulls Him aside privately, and what's he say? No, that's never going to happen, Lord. This is plan A. And what does the Lord reply? Some pretty strong language, isn't it? Get behind me, Satan. I mean, here's an unsuccessful plan. I mean, because if you look back to verse 18. I mean, Peter had just been called the rock, the stone, and I mean, you know, that's his name. He'd just been blessed. And don't you know, do you think, man, plan A, I'm a rock. Man, everyone's going to depend upon me. I'm Mr. It. And then you only get 5 verses down, and this guy who was who was a rock became what? A stumbling block. Stumbling block. What was his mistake? He didn't have God's plans, God's interest in mind. Now maybe look back the page again here in chapter 14, verses 28 through 31. You remember, this is the walking on water instant. Peter said to Him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on water. Verse 29, he says, come. Peter gets out of the boat. He walks on water toward Jesus. Seeing the wind, he became frightened, and immediately he sinks, and he says, Lord, save me. You know, Peter's plan A, I'm going to walk on water with the Lord. And he did, didn't he? I mean, he takes a few successful steps, but we know he takes his focus off the Lord, and And he sinks like a rock that he is, which I think is kind of interesting. But not a totally successful plan. One more, turn to John 18. When he's confronted by the soldiers, you remember what he does? He has a sword in hand. You guys would like a sword like that, wouldn't you? John 18, verse 10. Simon Peter then, having his sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave, and we know his name is Malchus, and he cuts off his right ear. Whack! What do y'all think about that? No. Plan A, fight for the Lord. Right? Plan B, the Lord puts his ear back on. Peter's made almost every mistake possible. But in every failed plan, Peter endured. And Jesus uses it to teach him a lesson. And we know because Peter was willing to listen to the Lord. I mean, this guy goes on, we know, to preach the first day of Pentecost. Helped establish the early church. And we might, you might think, why choose Peter for all these tasks? Because he just keeps failing. But with each failed test, God was producing something in Peter's heart. Yeah, there's a lot that we can learn when we go through trials, but probably some of the biggest things we've learned in life. Didn't we learn those in our failed plans? One more. When our plans fail, when plan A fails, maybe God is preparing us for something greater. Here's what I want us to understand. God never takes us backwards. Okay? Moving forward, not backwards. Now, we may not understand what he's doing at the time, but that doesn't change the fact that he does want to do something great in our lives. I mean, I think Greg quoted this scripture this morning in class, Isaiah 55. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, says God. I mean, that verse tells us God has a game plan for our lives. If we'll trust Him to execute that plan, He will do everything to be done in order to bring us into what He has prepared for us. And you know what? If our plan A or plan X isn't working, be open to the fact that God will use it maybe to prepare us for something better. Corrie ten Boom, we know, the Holocaust survivor, she said this: every experience God gives us, every person He puts into our lives is the perfect preparation for a future only He can see. One more thought here or so. Oh, it's early. Y'all have any ideas what to do with our time? In Genesis 37 through 50 is the story of Joseph. And it's so much more than just a dramatic story of his life. The hand of God is in really every scene, ruling and overruling. And we know God builds a hero, saves a family, and creates a nation that will bring a blessing to the whole world. But did Joseph's plan A work out? No. He had a dream of greatness, right? And what his problem was? Is that he told his brothers, yeah, God appeared to me and I'm better than you guys. So, no wonder they threw him in a pit, right? Broken plans, crumbled dreams, deep disappointment makes you wonder what all of his thoughts were through those years. And we know through a series of events, Joseph's freed from prison. Eventually he's brought before Pharaoh, promoted to second in command. He's the instrument that later would save his family and his people from a 7-year famine. You know what? Joseph could look back and see that God was working behind the scenes the entire time when his plan A and B and C and D appeared to not be working. Let me close with just a few thoughts here. I want us to remember this. We're never without a way because Jesus is the way. And in Joseph's life, Peter's life, many other Bible characters, God took the bad, their plan that didn't work. And here's the good thing. They turned it into something good. And here's the thing. I can remember when we were had left here and we're in Colorado for a few years, and we decided it was in our best interest to move back. I called and talked to one of the instructors at Sunset, and I said, what if it's the wrong move coming back? And I liked what he said. He said, God can still take a wrong move and turn it out right. God's using every situation for our good. His plan is not, it's not a fallback plan. God's plan really is plan A, should be plan A for our lives. If something we plan doesn't work out, or if a door seems closed, I want us to believe that God has something greater in mind for us. Years ago, my sister gave me this little plaque that's in my office, and it's so true. It says, when God closes a door, He always opens a window. Closed door might be plan A. It may just be a window, but maybe that's God's plan. I want us to understand, when our A doesn't work out in life, and it hasn't for all of us for various reasons, I want us to know B stands for better. Kelsey, why don't you come and lead us in the invitation song?